Let's talk about this story. So what are Democrats hiding in Ukraine? What is George Soros, the billionaire, hiding in Ukraine? What is Hunter Biden hiding in Ukraine? Turns out quite a bit. So much so that they had a game plan in place for when we all figured it out, when the jig was up, basically. Now, remember, the FBI had in its possession, just for some context here, the FBI had in its possession Hunter Biden's laptop in 2019, well before the election. Remember, 2019, They had the laptop in place, right?
If we didn't believe that before yesterday, we do now, because Michael Schellenberger published the subpoena asking the laptop shop for it.
Yeah, so we know unequivocally that the FBI had it in their possession. We knew that a long time ago because the New York Post told us that was the case, but now we have confirmation of that.
But they were deplatformed for doing so. Now, at least, that is accepted information to talk about.
So that date is very important, 2019. And thanks to the documents unearthed in the Twitter files, we now know that George Soros funded a role-playing exercise in September of that year, 2020. Okay, just stay with me on this. This is freaking crazy. It was designed, this role-playing exercise, they gamed this whole thing out. George Soros and his merry band of freaks rolled this thing out, designed to hide Hunter Biden's shady business dealings in Ukraine. You can't make this up. Perhaps this is why he's been so worried about the destruction of his investments in Ukraine, or the destruction of Ukraine, because all the land that he owns in Ukraine and the biolabs that he's been helping to fund in Ukraine, saying that civilization might not survive because Russia is going into Ukraine. Listen to George Soros. I've added some subtitles so you can understand Lizard Man.
Since the last Davos meeting, the course of history has changed dramatically. Russia invaded Ukraine. That has shaken Europe to its core. The European Union had been established to prevent such a thing from happening. Even when the fighting stops, as it eventually must, the situation will never revert to what it was before. The invasion may have been the beginning of the Third World War, and our civilization may not survive it.
So Mr. Sunshine was running a nonprofit group called Open Society Foundation that put on a fake multi-day event carried out by the Aspen Institute in order to deal with bad news around Hunter Biden's shady business dealings. Let me repeat that. George Soros gamed out a whole multi-day event in which they played out a scenario where if something happened to Hunter Biden that showed his shady business dealings with his dad, we would have a game plan in place with the media to respond to it. Okay? I mean, really? This is true. So Michael Schellenberger reporting in the Twitter files, the organizer of this event was Vivian Schiller, the former CEO of NPR, the former head of news at Twitter, former general manager of New York Times, former chief digital officer of NBC News. Attendees included Meta's Facebook head of security policy and the top national security reporters for the New York Times, Washington Post, and others. Now, according to the Daily Caller, the training exercise was titled The Burisma Leak. The Burisma Leak. Like, what a title.
Yes, I know what that is. Okay.
The Ukrainian energy company for whom...
Wait, where do I know the Burisma? Sorry, where do I know that? What is that?
That's...
Are you asking for real or are you being sarcastic?
Yeah, no, for real.
Burisma is the energy company that Hunter Biden was an investor in.
Yeah. So
right. Thank you.
It was his shady Ukrainian energy dealings that he did. So they labeled it right after. It's like, I don't know. It's like having ties with Epstein and then like calling it the Epstein leak. Like it's like calling it exactly what it is.
When you hear that word, your spidey sense has to go off, because you know that this is something that the Biden administration and the Biden campaign did not want you to link to Hunter Biden.
Right. So good, we got this game plan called the Burisma leak. Involved a series of hypothetical leaks during October 2020, showing that Hunter Biden had made more money in his role at Burisma than previously disclosed. This was like the fake leak that they were coming up with. And had communicated with his father about his work there, Schellenberger reported. The exercise was meant to shape how the media covered the eventual leak of the Hunter Biden laptop story and the way that the social media platforms carried it. This is a following from the game plan. This is a following from game plan. They followed it to a T. So here it is. Here it is on your screen. So day one, October 5th, anonymous website, bidencrimes.info, and a Twitter account, Hunter LOLs, begin posting documents that purport to be from Burisma. And it goes on and on. The Drudge Report, day 2, Tuesday, links to the anonymous website, bidencrimes.info, and the site is quickly picked up by other fringe media. It begins to spread on social media sites. Then Fox and Friends on October 7th discusses Biden crimes in its 8 a.m. block, 7 a.m. block. Donald Trump tweets 6 minutes later. I mean, this is like unbelievable what happened. Like, this is what happened, right? 3 reporters then end up covering it, blah, 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 blah. And then, all right, let's go to the next slide, because then this is unbelievable. And I want to call your attention to the third bullet point here on this list. So, which is, well, the Biden campaign adopted the policy of Hillary Clinton's campaign in 2016, and the Macron campaign says they will not confirm the veracity of any documents. That's the plan. Then CrowdStrike announces without further detail it has reason to believe that bidencrimes.info is the work of Fancy Bear, which is a foreign actor. Fancy Bear APT 28 is a foreign actor. So
is that some kind of euphemism for Russia?
Yeah, basically. Like it's a foreign actor, Fancy Bear APT 28. It's like, it's like a Russian actor, okay. Right?
Fancy Bear?
They're going to blame it on that. Like, they're going to come out. This is all planned, guys. Like, and here, number 3, this third bullet point here is CNN's Jim Scioto reports an anonymous Cloudflare executive who says that he doubts the CrowdStrike appraisal. Cloudflare believes that no foreign actor is involved and has evidence that Biden leaks is being hosted and run by Americans. So I just want to point out there, like, a bunch of stuff there. First of all, unbelievable, right? I mean, this is like how this all happened. And so I was not surprised at all to see Jim Scioto's name on there from CNN. They use him at CNN as an example for this story, deep state mouthpiece.
Of like, who could we get to say these things we need to say?
Yes, exactly. So I wasn't surprised at all, because he always is like putting out news from deep state sources, right? He's whatever the intelligence state wants to get out there, go to CNN, give it to Jim, because he'll push out any of this fake propaganda story. They seemingly feed it to the guy who puts it out right away on CNN. Look, here's a couple of examples. I called this out months ago in the end of August when he was tweeting about that Ukrainian offensive that he got all this scoop about that was about to happen. Like, they literally gave him battlefield details. Like, what a pile of shit this was. Like, no, come on. You're going to give Jim Scioto at CNN exactly what the Ukrainian forces and Americans are going to do in Ukraine? No, you're not. This was a total plant of a story in order to try to raise more money and boost morale. Ukrainian forces have begun shaping operations in South Ukraine to prepare the battlefield for a significant Ukrainian offensive. 2 senior U.S. officials briefed on Intel tell me. U.S. believes the long-anticipated counteroffensive will include air and ground ops. Sure. So here he is before the 2020 election, peddling intelligence state garbage and talking points on CNN's air. Watch.
We are 1 year away, less than a year away from the next election, 3 years after Russia, with consequence, meddled in the 2016 election. One thing is clear from everybody who testified is the President of the United States never expressed any interest in defending the U.S. against that kind of interference. In fact, what he did, he was interested in a whole lot of other stuff that undermines that goal of defending U.S. election from Russian interference, one of which Fiona Hill highlighted there, which was presenting an alternate explanation, an entirely false one, that it was Ukraine that somehow hacked the DNC server, not Russia. So, clear from the testimony that this is not a priority for the president, protecting the election, but also clear that he was moving the machinery of government to pursue something that undermines that defense, repeating a Kremlin talking point.
Isn't it amazing? Like your name is literally in a George Soros backed document.
As someone who will comply.
Yes. I just love it.
I mean, that's got to be the easiest job in the world, to be the reporter that just spits out what the Pentagon tells you to, because you don't have to do any investigating. It's just like, yeah, I want that job. I would hate that job, but
right.
I want a job that easy would be nice.
You just wear the suit.
So you come into the office. You just come into the office that day, and you go over to the CIA fax machine that you have set up in your office. You've got 4 fax machines, one from the Department of Homeland Security, FBI, CIA, and I don't know, Pentagon. And what am I talking about today? Pentagon officials tell me, breaking news, I better go down and tell the newsroom, and I'm going to go right on the air. That's how this shit works. It's unbelievable.
He's a Greg Brady. Did you ever see that Brady Bunch where they just choose him because he fits the suit?
Yes, yes.
That's exactly what he is.
Exactly.
He fits the suit.
He fits the mouthpiece of intelligence. Recently, Yoel Roth told Kara Swisher that he had been primed to think about the Russian hacking group ATP-28, right? This Russian bear. This like foreign adversary, right? He'd been primed, as Schellenberger writes about this, before the news of the Hunter Biden laptop came out. When it did, then Roth said, well, it set off every single one of my finely tuned Russian bear hack and leak operation alarm bells, because he'd been primed because George Soros, and they put on this whole charade with how this thing was going to roll out. Watch.
We learn about DC leaks, and we learn about the intersection between APT-28, a unit of Russian military intelligence, a hacking group. And so the morning of the Hunter Biden story in the New York Post happens, and it was weird, right? We didn't know what to believe. We didn't know what was true. There was smoke. And ultimately for me, it didn't reach a place where I was comfortable removing this content from Twitter. But it set off every single one of my finely tuned APT-28 hack and leak campaign alarm bells.
Because they primed you for it. It set off my finely tuned. They told you what to think.
But now that we have seen his email behavior extensively, I don't buy that. Mm-hmm. He seemed very willing to do whatever Uncle Sam wanted him to do. Do this. Okay.
Right.
Jump. How high?
What do I need to do? I'll do anything for you. Yes.
So that's nice of him to say about himself in hindsight. But I don't feel like his behavior, I think that he has a disconnect from himself.
So we learned today something really interesting. We learned today that COVID vaccines were being tested at biolabs in Ukraine. Let me repeat that. Redacted has learned from a trusted source that COVID vaccines were being tested at biolabs in Ukraine. Biolabs that Hunter Biden was intimately familiar with. As Redacted reported months ago here on this program, Hunter Biden was involved in funding those biolabs in Ukraine.
Biolabs that the U.S. State Department has confirmed existed and testified during Congress that they were involved in biological projects.
Yeah, which they wouldn't go much, in greater. Well, for months they denied it. They told us absolutely not. That's a joke. There is no such thing. But then, of course, they did confirm it reluctantly.
Yes.
But now we know, and what we'd long thought was that there was that they were testing COVID-19 vaccines in Ukraine at these biolabs. As we reported on Redacted in 2014, a firm called Meta Biota, worst name ever, which specializes in detecting, tracking, and analyzing potential disease outbreaks, signed an $18 million federal contract as a subcontractor for Black and Veatch in Georgia and Ukraine. Meta Biota was started with the help from President Biden and from President Biden's son, Hunter Biden, and his investment firm, Rosemont Seneca Technologies Partners, which he founded alongside John Kerry's stepson in 2009. Russia wants to know, of course, hey, what bioweapons is the United States developing in these biolabs in Ukraine? Turns out some serious shit's being built there. A few weeks ago, Russia officially submitted a complaint with the United Nations to expose this secret. What is the United States hiding there? And the United Nations said, sorry, we can't tell you the truth. UN Security Council votes against probe into U.S. biolabs.
Not into that one.
Not interested. Of course, you'll recall the U.S. denied there were any biolabs in Ukraine at all. The Department of Defense even called it Russian propaganda, laughable Russian propaganda. Shut up, don't ask questions, said John Kirby when he was asked about this by reporters on March 9th.
And on this issue of military biological labs in Ukraine that the Russians keep raising, can you basically explain to us what type of relationship, if any, there was between the Pentagon and the Ukrainian side on any biological labs? When was the last cooperation, and what do you have to say about these Russian accusations?
The Russian accusations are absurd. They're laughable. And, in the words of my Irish Catholic grandfather, a bunch of malarkey. There's nothing to it. It's classic Russian propaganda. And I wouldn't, if I were you, I wouldn't give it a drop of ink worth paying attention to.
Yeah. Don't write about it. Just look the other way. Don't even do anything about it. So, of course, you knew they'd want to keep this all quiet, right? That's why George Soros put on this multi-day event. The New York Post story appeared to reveal that Hunter Biden introduced his father, then Vice President Joe Biden, to a top executive from a Ukrainian energy company known as Burisma. So they knew about this. They knew exactly what was on the laptop. They knew about the shady dealings. They knew all of it. Less than a year later, the elder Biden reportedly pressured the Ukrainian government to fire a prosecutor who was looking into the firm at Burisma. And then, of course, most of the mainstream news outlets refused to report on the story prior to the election, and Twitter and Facebook both suppressed the story.
Yes.
And George Soros' tentacles go very, very deep into this Ukrainian story. It's fascinating.
You really brought that one full circle, honey.
I did. That's what I do. Now I have a headache.
I mean,
well, that when you showed the image of like where they had it all laid out like in text, I mean, that is like evil overlord kind of stuff to be like,
yes.
Like have it that pre like what's the word I'm looking for? Like it's almost like precognitive. Like how did they know that was going to happen? Because they knew it was going to happen.
Right. They knew that the CNN reporter would report it because we're feeding them the story. So we're giving them the story. That's how we know it's going to be out there on the mainstream media. And they have their marching orders to deny it. And that's what the Biden administration